Any indication so far of what may have made him turn? Because you look at like the real estate video, he had this real estate video from 2020, looks like a normal guy. Have you figured out yet when that started to turn?
That has been the big question for us, trying to understand what that turning point was. You know, as you said, like, here's a guy in the Army, gets deployed to Afghanistan, earns himself a global war on terrorism service medal in that, you know, and comes out of the military and essentially goes on to a really professional career in real estate. He's talking about cryptocurrency and investing. He, you know, and then ends up in a six-figure job at the Deloitte consulting firm, where he was working up until this New Year's Day. That what we were hearing from talking to people, talking to neighbors, talking to his family, was there was a turning point in recent months where they noticed him starting to act more erratically. Some dangerous behavior, so dangerous that his ex-wife had moved to try and limit his contact with their daughters. And you know, and friends also saw him as, and neighbors saw him as someone who's growing more isolated, right? He wasn't showing up at the nearby mosque where a lot of local Muslim families were going, and he was staying a lot of his time just inside the home, which, you know, raises the big questions: what's going on behind those closed doors? Where is he getting his information about his faith? What is he turning to where there might be some indication of radicalization going on?
Mike, when you say dangerous behavior and that people were, you know, family members were concerned, did they elaborate any more or any specifics?
I mean, there was just talk of, you know, how he had started to talk. I mean, they used the word acting crazy, and he was doing more things that expressed in their mind a more fervent belief in his faith, things to do with his hair and how he was acting. And all those things combined was enough for them to feel like he was being dangerous, being unsafe, wasn't desired for him to be around his children anymore. And his children were 20 years old and 15 years old, his daughters. And so it was a big enough concern that his activity at that point was enough to try and push him away.
John, what do you make of this? You know, what Mike's found out about this man, and is it possible that family and friends didn't know, you know, thought something strange was happening with him, but had no idea that he was being radicalized?
Well, I think it's possible they didn't know. I mean, the way I read, I think the New York Times story today was that here was a man who was starting to become overwhelmed also with some of his personal financial problems and the problems he'd had with his marriages. And then, you know, the world that he built that you described earlier, Deloitte and six-figure salaries and all of those kind of things, started to collapse around him. So whatever else was going on, and I don't know about the radicalization part, he was also under just sort of the real world pressures that we're all familiar with that can cause people to become psychologically disturbed at first and then you know, possibly deranged. So I think there's two elements that are possibly at work here, both the practical life problems that he was facing and then the radicalization issue.
Do you think, John, that our government, that the FBI has a hold on, you know, these homegrown terrorists, radicalization? I mean, is there more of this than we realize? Because it seemed like for a while, at least to me, you didn't hear about this as much. And now all of a sudden we've got this situation in New Orleans. We don't know exactly what happened in Vegas, but could be the same kind of thing. I mean, is this happening more than we realize, John?
Well, I don't think necessarily. The way I read the situation in Vegas, and of course, eventually we're going to want to know more about the background of this individual and what kinds of problems he might have been facing that would cause him to want to commit suicide. It's clearly a suicide, but we want to know what the motivation was, and we don't at this point. And I think same with the situation in New Orleans. At the moment, I would not read this as necessarily an indication that we have some kind of generalized phenomenon of domestic terrorism in the United States. There have been incidents, but I think we have to keep them in perspective.
Hey, thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget, click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.